Hello chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today! Today's monster is one that flies under the radar. The Nissan 180SX with the R35-Swap usually gets overshadowed by its S13 Silvia stablemate, which weighs less, has more power with its turbo LS swap, and its performance point rating is abnormally low. Since I've already covered the S13, let's see how this missile compares. As usual, the 180 has all of the upgrades fitted, including the wide body and the increased body rigidity option. All of the adjustable parts have been left alone to begin with, except for the downforce, which has been maxed, and the transmission, which I've already adjusted to suit this car's output. For this episode, the car is on 17-inch wheels with a wide offset, just in case the larger wheels didn't soak up the bumps at the Nordschleife. I later found this car isn't too negatively affected by larger wheels though. I have a video about the effects of wheel size on car performance if you're interested. The car has a front splitter for front downforce and a rear diffuser, which unlike most diffusers only adds downforce to the rear of the car, meaning we can use a less garish rear wing option. Normally I'd use a custom wing set for extra rear downforce, but we don't need it here, so I've used a quote-unquote type spoiler. I have a video explaining downforce and aero in more detail if you're interested. After taking a large dose of hopium, I tried a custom race at Deep Forest against all of my hypercars to see how this Japanese coupe held up. Thanks to a lack of rear traction, it's not suited to low-speed corners, preferring to spin its wheels at well over 100 miles per hour. Thanks to the soft suspension, the car feels like it's all over the place and leaves me with very little confidence, which results in a spin. Ow! Bugger. With racing tyres, a softly sprung car effectively just throws itself around, which does not feel reassuring. Since the car sits with its nose up on an even ride height, I lowered the front end for a nicer stance. As usual, I then increased the natural frequency to keep the body movement under control. This time the car fared much better. I didn't crash or spin, though my driving was still questionable. Forza tactics! The car felt a lot more attached to the road, though it still didn't really give me any confidence in pushing the car closer to its limits. I then increased the anti-roll bars to further reduce body roll. I also reduced camber to improve traction in a straight line, which should also help with braking. Adding some rear toe in should make the car slightly more stable when accelerating out of corners. With the differential, increasing initial torque will make the car less agile but more forgiving. Decreasing acceleration will send more power to the inside wheel, which will make the car less likely to power oversteer. Decreasing braking should make the brakes feel sharper. This made more of a difference than I expected, making the car feel more composed. It's still got 1000 horsepower at the end of the day, so it's more than capable of decapitating you, but it's much easier to drive than it was. While I was fairly happy with the way the car handled now, I decided to try some ballast weight to the rear anyway, not enough to hurt the braking performance, but hopefully enough to add some traction out of corners. The added traction did make a noticeable difference on a track like Deep Forest, where there's plenty of sharp corners that need to be taken at low speed, followed by high-speed sections. This would typically favour a car with all-wheel drive, so I certainly made things difficult for myself by taking this car to this track. Either way, I was now happy with the car's handling, so it was now time for the Nurburgring run. Once again, I didn't actually have to make any changes to the setup, though it took a few attempts to get a lap I was happy with. As engine swaps go, there is a good reason why this one usually goes unnoticed. It's not quite as viable as the race car engine swaps, such as the 787B engine, R92CP engine, or the various Group 2 and Group 3 engine swaps. On the other hand, it's also not so completely stupid that it's meme-worthy, like the 1200 horsepower van from the latest update. As a result, it often gets left in a weird middle ground where many players don't necessarily remember that it exists. So, on the off chance any of you care about my opinion, do I think you should give this engine swap a chance? Not really. If you have this engine, put it in a Lancia Delta. A 1000 horsepower Delta is hilarious. Beyond that, most of the cars that can have this VR38 engine aren't really worth going for. Most of the Nissans that can have this engine fitted are almost as powerful on their standard engine. Meanwhile, you can fit this engine to a couple of Group 4 cars, which will then lose the advantage of their fuel economy. That pretty much leaves you with the Alpine A110 and the Lancia Delta, or this 180SX. Both the Alpine and the Lancia are much more interesting, so if you have a VR38 taking up space, try one of those two. In the end, the 180SX gets a time of 6 minutes 24. That's 4 seconds behind the S13 that I compared this car to at the start of the video. It's also 3 seconds faster than a van. So, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my settings helped, or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time where I'll suffer my way through the Porsche-swapped Beetle. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care, and ta-ra.